Greetings, Pokey fans! Michael here, and in today's video, I will be covering the complete history and lore of the character who is probably the Pokemon universe's most famous Pokemon master, Pokemon Trainer Red. First, let's start with the basics. Who is Red? Simply put, Red is the canonical protagonist of the Gen 1 and 3 Kanto games, those being Red, Blue, Yellow, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. He is not the protagonist of the Let's Go Kanto games and is in fact a wholly separate character. More on that later. Since Red is the protagonist character, his name is not always Red. His name is whatever the player character decides to call him, and his in-game team is whatever the player character decides to use because the player controls the team. The widely agreed upon explanation for this is that every save file of a Pokemon game is an alternate universe. So there's endless iterations of the character Red, where he has different names and teams and is sometimes replaced by Leaf, the female character from Fire Red and Leaf Green. This is the case for all Pokemon protagonists in the main series. They have default names, which the community widely uses to refer to these characters, but they can actually be named anything, and their teams can be anything. But Red is a special protagonist because he is the only single one that appears in other games besides the one he stars in. Okay, technically the Black and White protagonist is mentioned in Black 2 and White 2 via the use of the memory link feature, and I also think through just regular gameplay, but the character themselves never actually appears. They are never given an official name, it just uses the name from your old save file, and they don't have an in-game team. You can't battle them, whereas Red is named Red, and you can fight him. Red is special because he has an overarching general timeline that spans over the course of many games and generations, not just the games that he is the star of. I'm going to go over his general event timeline. Or should I say, timelines? In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire's Delta episode, a conversation with Zinnia occurs that reveals that there are parallel universes of the Pokemon world. More specifically, it reveals that there are universes where Mega Evolution exists and those where it does not. This implies that the original Hoenn games of Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald occur in a timeline without Mega Evolution, widely known as the original timeline. Then their remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, occur in one with Mega Evolution, called the Mega Timeline. This duality of an original timeline and a Mega Timeline was confirmed in the Alola games. Annabelle, the head of the battle tower in the Emerald Battle Frontier, was sucked through a wormhole into the Mega Universe where no such battle tower exists yet. The evil team leaders in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were brought there from universes where their plans succeeded. And the Hoenn team leaders very distinctly have their original appearances and do not have Mega Evolutions or Primal Reversions on their teams, meaning they came from alternate versions of the original timeline. How this all relates to Red is that he appears in both original timeline games and Mega Timeline games. So he has more than one timeline. His life follows different series of events. And these differences are not just simply, oh, they're the same, but in one he uses Mega Evolution. They are substantially different. I will go over his story in both timelines, but before I do, I just want to let you know that if you are watching this video on the day it comes out, this is the last day ever to pick up my Champion Time merch design. This Galar Champion jersey inspired design is on official Champion brand products that I unlocked on Teespring, and they are super high quality. If you do not buy it today, you will genuinely never have the chance to buy it again. So click the link in the description below or click the shirts below the video to pick up this really awesome merch design before it's gone in a matter of hours. But now that I've covered that, let's start with Red's story in the original timeline, the one that you're likely more familiar with. 11 years prior to the events of Gens 1 and 3, Red is born. We know he is 11 thanks to the instruction manual for the original Gen 1 games. He grows up alongside his rival, named Blue in all cases where Red appears as a non-protagonist. The two were either rivals in infancy, or they were friends and played together until one day Blue decided to become a bully. It depends on whether you ask the instruction manual or Professor Oak. One day when Red is 11, he is invited to pick a starter Pokemon from Professor Oak. In the Red, Blue, Fire Red, and Leaf Green universes, he selects Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, then Blue selects the one with the type advantage over Red's. In Yellow, Blue ends up with an Eevee, while Red gets a Pikachu. And then Red's journey begins through the Kanto region on a mission to defeat all of the gym leaders. He first defeats Brock in Pewter City, then Misty in Cerulean City, and then the next 5 gym leaders, those being Lieutenant Surge, Erica, Sabrina, Koga, and Blaine, in whatever order he wants, I'm pretty sure. The only caveat is that he must defeat Koga before Blaine, because beating Koga is required to have Surf, and you have to have Surf to be able to reach Blaine. During these adventures, Red battles Blue on several occasions. Additionally, he takes on the villainous Team Rocket. He fights them in Mount Moon, declines a membership offer on Nugget Bridge, reclaims a stolen item from one in Cerulean City, raids their hideout in Celadon, ousts them from the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town, and shuts down their takeover of Silphco in Saffron City. Twice during his Team Rocket battles, Red defeats the leader of Team Rocket, Giovanni, once in the hideout and once in Silphco. After the Silphco defeat, Giovanni isn't seen again until Red gets 7 badges, at which point he returns to Viridian City to find Giovanni there as the final gym leader. Upon being defeated, Giovanni disbands Team Rocket, meaning Red was mostly single-handedly responsible for taking down this entire criminal organization. Red then traverses through the Victory Road and defeats the Elite Four at the Indigo Plateau, only to discover that Blue has become champion just prior to Red arriving. After an epic battle, Red comes out on top, becoming the Kanto Pokemon champion. I should mention there's an alternate version of Red in these Kanto events displayed in Pokémon Origins, which is mostly the same, but there are some distinct differences. Number 1, Red starts with Charmander specifically, not any of the other 3 options. Number 2, Red loses to Giovanni and Silphco, then Team Rocket flees of their own accord. Number 3, Red canonically completes the Kanto Pokédex, including catching Mewtwo, whereas Game Red does not necessarily do so. And finally, number 4, Red has a Mega Charizard X. That last part means that Pokémon Origins is its own separate universe version of Red, separate from the original timeline, because there are things about it that conflict with the original timeline. First off, Red talks a lot, which is unusual, but secondly, he has a Mega Charizard, and Mega Evolution does not exist in the original timeline. However, there are other reasons why it can't be a part of the Mega timeline either, which I will cover later in the video. But back to the original timeline Game Red, in the Fire Red and Leaf Green version of events, Red then goes on to explore the Sevi Islands, quashing the remaining Team Rocket stragglers, but also assisting Celio and Bill with creating a long-distance trading network between Kanto and Hoenn. And then, he disappears. We don't know at what point exactly he does, but at some point in the 3-year span between the Gen 1 events and the Gen 2 events, Red leaves and doesn't really tell anyone where he's going. He abdicates his position as champion to Lance, and we know he retreats to Mount Silver to train, with no one but his Pokemon at his side. He isn't seen or heard from for quite some time, with his mother even confirming that she herself hasn't heard anything from him in a while. Then, 3 years after Red becomes the Kanto champion, the events of the Generations 2 and 4 games occur. But we only really care about the events of the Johto games, Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, because those are the games where Red appears. These events focus on the Johto protagonist, whose default names are Ethan, Chris, or Lyra, but of course have infinite names for all the various cartridge alternate universes. This character sets out from New Barktown, defeats all the gym leaders and a resurgence of Team Rocket in Johto, defeats Lance to become the new Pokemon champion, then earns all the Kanto gym badges, resulting in 16 total. Professor Oak then allows the character to explore Mount Silver, a dangerous place packed to the brim with very strong wild Pokemon. On the summit, the Johto protagonist finds Red, now age 14 due to the 3-year time difference, and they begin a battle without exchanging words. Red's team varies slightly depending on whether it's Gen 2 or Gen 4. In both instances, he has a Pikachu and all 3 fully evolved starters, meaning any one of them could be his starter since all versions of Red start with one of these 4. He He also has a Snorlax in both Gens 2 and 4, likely one of the two that blocked his path at one point during his Kanto journey. In the Gen 2 games, his final team member is Espeon, potentially the evolved form of the Eevee that he received in Celadon City as a gift. In Gen 4, his final team member is Lapras, likely intended to be the Lapras that he received as a gift while fighting through Silphco to defeat Team Rocket. After the Johto protagonist defeats him, Red once again disappears. But he reappears on the summit for another battle each time the Johto protagonist defeats the Elite Four. Red is then not seen in any mainline Pokemon games again until Black 2 and White 2, which occur several years after the events of Gens 2 and 4. We know this because Caitlyn ages substantially from her appearances in Gen 4 to Black and White, and then Black 2 and White 2 occur 2 years after Black and White. We don't know exactly how much time has passed, but we know that it's enough time for this seemingly young child to age into an adult, and then 2 years tacked on top of that. One weird thing though is that Red's sprite in Black 2 and White 2 is nearly identical to his sprite in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, so he doesn't have any visible aging like Caitlyn does. However, he has to have aged because both him and Caitlyn appear in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So if she got older, so did he. I think the identical sprite situation was just due to the devs deciding not to give him a new one, either due to time constraints or laziness. We do know for sure that he did age though, we just don't know by how much. We can estimate maybe like 6-ish years based on how Caitlyn gets older, but we can't know for sure. This older Red has returned to public life and is a participant in the Champions Tournament portion of the Pokemon World Tournament, alongside other champions including Blue, Lance, Steven, Wallace, Cynthia, and Alder. While the number of Pokemon he can use changes depending on the battle format, he rotates between the same 6 species of Pokemon that he had in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And that is the last time we see Red in the original timeline, because Black 2 and White 2 were the final 2 original timeline games. Well, technically Sword and Shield could be in the original timeline, we just don't know. They don't have Mega Evolution, which is a tick in favor of original timeline, but it could also be just because they just choose not to use Mega Evolution there because they have Dynamax as an option they like better. We just have to wait for more info in the expansion pass, maybe, in order to figure out where Sword and Shield lie in which timeline. But anyways, that completes Red's journey in the original timeline. But now for his journey in the Mega timeline, and his first appearance in order of game release, not chronologically, is in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Both him and Blue, now grown-ass men, have been invited to work as the bosses or battle legends in the Alola battle tree. Blue mentions that both himself and Red were both champions of the Kanto region in our own days, confirming that they no longer hold that position. If the Alola protagonist battles Red before entering the battle tree, he uses the same 6 species of Pokemon that he used in both Heart Gold Soul Silver and Black 2 White 2. As a boss within the tree, he rotates around usage of all those team members except Pikachu, and all 3 Kanto starters may Mega Evolve at some point or another, further confirming that this is a Mega Timeline Red. But here, Red is an adult, at the youngest in his late teens. What happened prior to him and Blue coming to Alola to work at the battle tree, besides him and Blue becoming Kanto champions at some point? That implies that events unfolded similarly in the Mega timeline as they did in the original timeline. But a pair of games proves that to be not true. Let's go Pikachu, and let's go Eevee. First off, I should mention that these games are in the Mega timeline because they include Mega Evolution, and despite the different catching and sometimes battle mechanics, they are still mainline games. Pretty straightforward logic there. Let's go Mega timeline. These games feature events that are extremely similar to the original timeline Kanto events, but with one glaring difference. Red and Blue are not the protagonist and rival. The protagonist is instead the Let's Go protagonist, whose default name is Chase for the boy and Elaine for the girl, and the rival is Trace. But these characters are not just pseudo redesigns, where they wholly replaced the original ones, and the original ones seemingly ceased to exist, like how Lyra replaced Chris. These are completely separate characters, which we know because Red and Blue appear in Let's Go as NPCs. Blue appears and is interacted with quite a lot, even ending up as the Viridian gym leader like he does in the original timeline. And this Blue has already gone on his journey. Trace even says at one point that in the past, Blue already defeated the Elite Four, which means that, there you go, it aligns with the Alola version of events that Blue is a former champion. Another big piece of information is Blue saying that when he went on his initial journey, Professor Oak hadn't created a Pokédex yet, so he was forced to scribble down map locations on a piece of paper. That info, combined with the fact that the Team Rocket events unfold as the player progresses through Let's Go, means that the creation of the Pokédex coincides with the Team Rocket events. So that means that Red and Blue are older characters in this timeline. They were born 2 to 3 years earlier, and therefore went on their journeys 2 to 3 years earlier. All this boils down to one big revelation. Red did not defeat Team Rocket in the Mega timeline. The Let's Go protagonist and Trace did. That's why Origins conflicts with both timelines and is its own separate thing. Him having a Mega Charizard means he's not in the original timeline, but him defeating Team Rocket means he's not in the Mega timeline. Origins completely separate. Now that we know all this, we can walk through Red's progression of events for the Mega timeline. Red, Blue, and likely Green as well start their Pokemon journeys from Pallet Town. Red picks Bulbasaur, which we know from his final team in Let's Go, Blue picks Charmander, and Green picks Squirtle. Red then goes on his Kanto journey absent of any Team Rocket issues. Down the road, both him and Blue become Kanto champion at some point, but to my knowledge, we don't actually have confirmation of which one was champion first. But it's implied that it happened the same as in the original timeline. Blue becomes the champion, and then Red defeats him. It's actually possible that Red was the champion that Trace defeated in order to become the champion, but I honestly don't think this is super likely because Trace says, I defeated the Elite Four and became champion, not I deleted the Elite Four and the champion. Therefore, I think the most likely, not confirmed, progression of events is that Red became champion and then dipped out like he did in the original timeline, and rather than filling that role with Lance, they just left it open, so Trace just had to beat the Elite Four. Red then does who knows what until showing up out front of the Pokemon League once the player has defeated at least 6 Master Trainers. His team is noticeably different from any other team he's had, swapping out Blastoise and Charizard for Machamp and Arcanine. His Venusaur goes Mega, thus being his strongest team member, further indicating that Bulbasaur was his starter. Red then continues to periodically battle the player character, reappearing every time they beat the Elite Four, until several years later, once Red and Blue have become adults, they're invited to become the Battle Masters at the Battle Tree and move to Alola to do so. Sometime prior to that, Red swapped his Machamp and Arcanine for Charizard and Blastoise, potentially doing some trading with Blue since Blue has both Arcanine and Machamp in the Battle Tree. And that concludes Red's Mega Timeline story, but he makes a few other appearances in spin-off games. First is Pokemon Stadium 2, where he is the final boss of Gym Leader Castle. His teams are almost completely different from any team he has elsewhere, with only Snorlax and Espeon being familiar. I personally don't think his or any other character's appearances in the Stadium games should be counted even as remotely canon. His other spin-off appearance is in Pokemon Masters, wearing his dope-as-hell Cygnus suit. He has a reputation here, and his sync pair Pokemon is Charizard. However, this Red is like Origins Red. He conflicts with both the original timeline and the Mega timeline. In the same way, actually. Masters Red has a Mega Charizard X, but is also confirmed to be the one to defeat Team Rocket due to Flint mentioning it in the Sync Pair story. Therefore, Masters is again its own offshoot universe, separate from the original and Mega timelines. So there you have it. That's the complete history and lore of Pokemon Trainer Red. I hope he makes another appearance in the main series game sometime soon, cause It's always fun to see him and learn more about him. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special thanks to my patrons over on Patreon who are helping support me during a time that is difficult for YouTube ad rates. If you want to help support me in the same way, the link is in the description below. Also, pick up a Champion Time shirt. Today is the last day. If you're watching this on the day it came out, do it or it's gone. All right, that's all I have for now. So until next time, big fans, gotta catch them all.